You guys, that's
Some
excellent.
good memories.
Yeah, that was good to see you again.
Talking about Bob, the return of Bob, I'm kind of curious how it was to handle the return.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why it is kind of paced the way it is. You know what I mean? That was a moment we slowed down more than any of the other. You know what I mean? Like, that was our moment we were trying to milk for the emotion. And, you know, because we're hoping everybody's recognizing that suit. The suit kind of looks like Bob's suit. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So we were hoping that everyone's going to be kind of like, already know kind of who it is. Once he gets glitched, you know what I mean?
Sure.
I think originally it was kind of like compressed a lot more in the script, and I think we did pull it apart a bit more by having the moments each separated, like getting glitched and then showing the badge. Not the badge, sorry, the icon.
It's a fan favorite scene, I think. And
that's great.
It hits a lot of beats. You know, you get the glitch moment and you have the frisket thing. And then finally, Andrea. Interesting that it's Andrea that's the one who actually says his name first.
Yeah, that was in the script that way, but it was always one of those things that we always quite liked, that she looks and recognizes him right away.
Yeah, it was almost, I always thought, you know, he kind of gives her his energy or perhaps his code. And that, from that, she's able to kind of realize, oh my gosh, this is the guy we've been looking for.
I think that's a really good explanation for it, for sure.
And then he pulls off his mask too, which is a Predator mask. Is it just me, or does it look like, it looks a lot like the Predator mask?
It does look a lot like the Predator mask. I think there was a ton of designs for it. And I think at some level, it came down to what we would be able to take off.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was one of those things like, how do we take, because I think there was some much cooler designs that Brendan had. But I think there was one that had a lot more kind of dreads kind of hanging out the back.
There's that heartbeat too, right before you see his face. He pulls off his mask and everyone holds their breath, and you're thinking he's gonna be degraded like all the other members of his crew.
There was some originally too. There was some in the design, I think, of Bob being somewhat degraded. Do you remember Casey?
I don't really remember seeing the design.
I remember him having kind of like this kind of corrupted, kind of like kind of barnacliness, kind of on the side of his face and on his neck. So I think there was like some sort of explanation in the sense that he was like, you know, when he first got sucked into the web, he was completely unprotected. You know what I mean? But because of his guardian skills, because he didn't have glitch anymore. That'd always be a good story to find out. Like, what was Bob getting sucked into the web?
Yeah, what happened to him in that time?
Yeah.
So did we? Sorry, Kembo, or because you're probably up on having watched these a lot more recently than us, but was there? I forget. Was there any explanation as to what Bob had been doing all this time, or what in terms of how much time had passed for Bob versus Matrix and Andrea?
That is actually one of the questions that we have here. Yeah, Daniel asks, in regards to the storyline, how exactly is it that Bob met the Web Riders and what's been going on in the meantime? I don't think it was something that was ever fleshed out in the series.
It never was, and I think there was some intent at some point, or like an attempt at some point of like having some dialogue. I kind of explained it in a short way, but every time I think it just never felt. It always landed kind of at the wrong moment, especially like in the final episode. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it was kind of like it never had its proper place that he could have that moment to tell somebody about what had happened to him. It felt like we got more important things to do, so I'll tell you later, kind of thing.
Sure.
It's a story for another day.
But presumably, there was no indication, I think, that time passed at different rates, was there? Like, it wasn't as if Bob had only been gone for a month or something, and where everyone else had lived for 15 years, I don't think.
That was the explanation for Matrix and Andrea. And the game speed is faster than not game speed, so that's how they kind of compiled up so quickly. But I don't think anything was ever mentioned for the web.
Okay, so then the time back in Mainframe wasn't nearly as long as Matrix and Andrea.
That's correct, yeah. But the time in Mainframe, the time that passed in Mainframe, I assume would have been the same amount of time that passed for Bob in the web.
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
So it could have been months or a year. I'm sure fans are screaming at their computers with their phones right now. You idiots! Haven't you watched all the episodes you've worked on?
You guys got it. Don't worry. You got it in the can. It's all good. Let's get to this then, shall we? We got a lot of questions here. I'm going to start.
Oh boy, this is going to be a gong show.
So you guys already addressed this a little bit, but I'm going to bring it up one more time because, maybe there's something that has yet to be, mentioned. But Morris asks, first of all, he says, thank you for the childhood memories, guys. Great work.
Wow, that's nice.
He says you did a great job adapting Brendan McCarthy's sketches and bringing them to digital life. Were his sketches and ideas influenced in any way by your 3D drafting limitations? Were there instances where you had to put your own spin to make the design work with the tools you had?
I think, Casey may be able to speak to this a bit better than me, but as far as I was concerned, Brendan didn't take our medium into account at all. He just drew what he was used to drawing in comics, and then we had to lump it. We had to figure out what to do. I mean, and obviously our visuals never lived up to his intricate drawings, but he didn't care.
Yeah, I think his involvement was I don't know, I always felt it was kind of really high level.
Very high level.
Right? He did the drawings and he worked with the hub and they figured out what they wanted to do and then things were passed down to us, but he didn't manage the production of those things with us. It was the drawings were done, his involvement was done, and then it was up to us to figure out how to make it, and we would just try and match it as best as we could. But yeah, there were obviously limitations at that time.
And he didn't have any approval. It's not like he would, normally now a production designer and a
art director
would, you'd be going back and forth on all your designs, right? And they would give notes and help steer you in the right direction. And he would basically just be at a highlight. He would often do sketch stuff before the scripts were written, and then the writers would work off of his art.
Yeah, and that was it. So did we have an art? Was there an art?
I was just gonna say. Well, I don't think there was much of an art department that I
don't think there was either.
We had a couple of designers. We had a guy named strangely Mike Jackson. I didn't remember him. And,
I remember Michael Jackson.
Yeah,
there was Clyde Klotz, right? But he was brought on for Beast Wars.
Yep.
Yeah.
He was married to Gillian Anderson.
Yeah. Gillian Anderson. I don't know if he did any work on ReBoot. I kind of think we didn't really have an art director or art department officially on ReBoot.
I don't remember there being a lot of designers. There might be some names, designers on the credits, but I remember mostly, Brendan as the art director, and he would be the one that would come and, he'd come down with his pad of paper and sketch out what you said. I need a prop that does this. I need a Matrix gun. What does Matrix gun look like? You know what I mean? And he'd draw it out, and he'd say this, and you'd be like, yeah, you know what I mean? Because you weren't going to say no, right? Because it looks good. No. You know what I mean?
and a lot of things you didn't get anything. You just got a verbal description from Ian or somebody in terms of what this should be, and you just did something, and then you showed it, and then you would be told, no, not like that. Change it, and you would just change it until you got it right.
Brendan would often look at what you kind of because a lot of times we were rebuilding a set or something out of the existing elements we already have. Not in season 3 as much. Do you know what I mean? Because
you were definitely you're kit bashing. You were taking things from different places and putting them together and then rematerialing them so that they would look coherent. Yeah, you were kit bashing.
Sometimes you would just give that image. You'd render a couple of stills of that image and send it upward to see what someone would say. And oftentimes you'd get Brendan McCarthy give you a drawing then based on what you guys have put together.
Yeah.
But then kind of just cleaned up and, you know what I mean, some art sensibilities put into it, you know what I mean? Because it was hey, we're using this model, making a cityscape, you know what I mean? And he'd be like, yeah, do it like this. So I remember that being a lot of times where you'd see if we rearrange it the way he says, and you look at it and you're like, wow, that looks so much better. Wow, that looks so much better.
Kind of along the same lines too, Taboo asked if it was difficult to implement shader effects to render and animate the web, because it looks so abstract, it looks so surreal, kind of organic, doesn't it?
Shaders.
Yeah.
I don't think we had shaders in the day, right?
I think you were right when we were talking during the episodes. I think it was this geometry with textures and maybe procedural textures, combination of those things. And then
I think there's some
slight animation on the slight animation on the geometry.
Yeah, the geometry would have a little bit of shape animation on it. I don't think it was even rigged. And then
no, probably not.
There would be a world sphere, a few of them with different textures on them, like we used to do for clouds.
Yeah,
and then I know the effects that where something would touch one of the blobs. That was actually one of the first compositing jobs that we did, where we would put it in probably Photoshop. I don't even know if we had. We didn't have.
We didn't have Photoshop.
Or yeah, maybe we
We
didn't have
had
it.
GIMP.
We had
We had
GIMP. There
GIMP.
you go.
Wow,
And
using
kind
the
of
game.
frame by frame, just sort of smear that a little bit.
Yeah. And then I think a
Yeah.
lot of those compositing things we probably would have done in the online. So would
Did
it,
they have
would it,
effects? Yeah, they would have had
were
like
able
sort
to-
of cheesy '80s video transition effects.
Well, what was the equipment we used in the online, Andrew? Do you remember?
Oh,
I think it was called.
started with a Q. Isn't it?
It wasn't like a
Yeah.
flame system, was it?
No, it was all real
it was-
time.
It was all real
It was
time.
older
was
than
why it
that.
was so what was it called again?
It's the kind of thing that
It was
you
called
would
something. You
use
called
for
it the this.
broadcast.
It was
Yeah. It's the kind of thing that you would use for broadcasts back in the day for like transitioning between live cameras or.
They were one of the few to do it this way, in the sense that they had multiple decks that he could control in the online.
Yeah.
And what they would do is take all the layers. The alpha channel would be on a tape, and the foreground would be on a tape, and the
That's
background would be on a
right,
different
yeah.
tape. And he'd have
Yeah,
to
there
cue
are
the, he'd
digital
have to,
tapes.
and that's why you'd get in trouble if your like layers didn't line up, because he'd have to line them up. He'd somewhat line them up manually. Do you know what I mean? And then he'd be going across, and then we started doing defocusing there a little bit with him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We do a lot of color
Things like
correcting there, right? A lot of vignetting, and we did a lot of touch-ups in the online.
Most
But
of
the
the
web
web
was-
stuff, it was just
Shapes,
animated textures
geometry,
and shapes moving around. And
Well,
It
speaking
wasn't as
of,
sophisticated as you guys thought.
No.
it sure does look sophisticated though. There's a lot going on in that webscape that you guys created.
I
Lots
think
of
it
Oh,
was
that's good.
years. It was years before what is known as shaders now really existed. Like I didn't hear the word shader until
no.
the 21st century.
Wow. Well, this person here, Taboo, is curious about it because they're working on a game called the Eldritch Dimension that has an area very inspired by your web in ReBoot.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, look
Cool.
for that.
We'll have to check it out.
Tell him to check out if there's any online stuff for Joe Cruz, Joseph Cruz, because he's done stuff.
He's
Or
the
maybe
guy that
don't.
did that.
Yeah.
Who's the artist?
All right,
Contact him on
Joseph
LinkedIn.
Cruz. Very cool. We'll check it out.
He did most of it. Yeah.
Speaking of the web, and this is something that I am personally very curious about. I think a lot of other fans too. But Vindalf asks, what makes the dangerous alien web different from the net?
I think at the time it was because the Guardians controlled the network. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And they protected it. And I think that was what it. So you think of all the different systems that are connected to this protected network. Where the web was, you could get access to the web, but it was like you could go anywhere, do anything. There were no rules on it. Kind of, like the web was when they were writing the story. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, the
There
web
was
was
no real-
super
yeah.
annoyingly slow and was just basically for video and picture like GeoCities websites.
Well, if you could, if you were going to do an episode today and you had to kind of portray the internet, the modern day internet, would it look more like the web in ReBoot, or would it look more like the net?
It's always an interesting thing, because I think like when you think about like the way something like Ready Player One does
Or
an online world.
Wreck-It Ralph or Ralph Breaks the Internet, I think, is pretty
Yeah.
cool in the way they do it.
And I think it all depends on how you set your, what's your operating system? Do you know what I mean? To a certain degree, like is it a Minecraft universe? Do you know what I mean? Because I could see that, do you know what I mean? I could see like a system, like a simple system, like, doesn't Minecraft have a new thing out called Minecraft World? Where it's like, it's the actual world in Minecraft, and you're geolocated on that world in your world, and you play on your phone, and you and a bunch of friends. Yeah,
That's
you and a bunch of friends looking through your phone. It's all AR. Do you know what I mean? So you can build stuff in Minecraft in the park. You could be outside with a couple of friends and build a statue. But then that statue is there for anybody else who comes by and looks around. Do you know what I mean? Like, so if somebody could come from another place and see it.
I think the web was now, if we were to design it, the web is too abstract in terms of it doesn't have a correlation to what people experience online.
Right.
There's no separation of like locations. Like you think of online as locations of websites, of domains, of areas. You're on Amazon has a certain look, and Netflix has a certain look, and there was none of that in the 90s. And in the web in our web you couldn't like go somewhere, whereas in our net it was like we were thinking of the net as different people's computers. that you were dropping
Or-
game cubes onto, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm going to be in Casey's computer, and this is what his mainframe circuit
And he has
board
a
looks like.
guardian in his computer, possibly, if he's got the
Yeah,
right
to
virus
keep viruses
software.
away or whatever, and if he's
What?
booting up a game that he's putting in on a floppy disk, that's the GameCube that comes down, and then I somehow got out through the local network to another computer who's someone else owns, which is slightly different and has slightly different things on their desktop, and then they're playing a different game some days. Or
Interesting.
That's the way I look at it, and I wonder, would you say like the web is maybe, because I always thought it was like the web is scary, right? We don't know what's out there, and I think if you look at it in today's kind of language, would you consider it like the dark web, like the underground, the part that we don't know about?
That's what I would say. I think that's because that's what like. I remember being in, you never wanted to get outside of your network on the web. Remember, they started locking down once viruses started coming into studios and stuff because people were just, going on the web on their work computers, and then it was like, where's all these viruses coming from?
Yep.
Get off of the web.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could just get shit from the web. It was just hitting you. You know what I mean? So, I think that was the idea, and then how the Guardians are virus software that protect the network,
protect that stuff from coming in and infecting our internal network, which was the net, right?
Yeah, and because it was there was no plan to it until season 4 with Damon as a virus plan. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think there's no plan in the web, which it's just chaos.
Yep.
is the way compared to like a secure network. You know what I mean? So I think that's how. But I think Ready Player One, the way they do that online kind of universe where there's a planet, and that planet is basically a localized network, and then inside that there's cities and what people make, and you know what I mean? I think that's how I really like that kind of vision of it. But,
Interesting. Yeah, Transhitman was asking about that too, actually. Speaking of locations, the Edge of Beyond, how does that kind of correspond to real life? Fred wants to know about this.
You can think of that as a modem or as a portal out of this localized network that we've been kind of jumping around. Like each system that Matrix and Andrea were jumping to, and then we're just basically different PCs, different computers. And so leaving that network of physical computers would have been dialing up on a modem and trying to connect to computers outside of that building or outside of that.
And it was needing to travel not inside of a game, because that was how they would hop before, right? They'd travel from system to system by staying, turning into the sprite icon and staying inside the game.
Yeah, it could almost be analogous to Wreck-It Ralph. They go between video games in their power bars, power cords, which doesn't really make sense, but that's how they had set up their universe. And then in Ralph Breaks the Internet, they get a modem, and they're like, "Pachoo!" And so the Edge of the Beyond would be that portal between the computers that they had been connected to, and then
that room that they go up to right before they blast off.
Yeah.
Rob says here, I like this one. Edge of Beyond is the first of several episodes that weren't aired in the UK. Do you have any thoughts regarding all the Brits who were deprived of seeing the end of the season?
That should have been a full question.
Wow. Yeah, that would have been a good full question.
I
so they didn't air it
remember
all?
that? Yeah.
I think what it was, the next episode after Bob's reunion with everybody, or actually during, he's having drinks and they're having a party with the crew, and everyone's kind of getting drunk. And I think what it was is that scene was not taken too well in the UK.
Do you think? Sorry, did none of the rest of the season air, or it was just that episode?
I think what it was is that the rest of the season just ReBoot stopped there in the UK until later on, when it got picked up.
It might be something as simple as the UK style of TV seasons, that there was too many episodes. Like, they're like, what? It's more than 6 episodes a season. We don't know what to do with it.
Well, they've always had.
They don't have a system. I find stuff from the BBC is like sometimes it's 3 episodes, sometimes it's 6 episodes.
I think it probably would have been their broadcast standard stuff, because
maybe
that show would have been on what eventually became BBC Kids, right? So, and I think in them, when you look at them, they have way stricter kind of like guidelines in terms of what can be seen on the shows. And I bet you if there was Bynum swilling back some alcohol, or what could be
You think that got us in trouble?
I bet you. I bet you it's something like that, right? Because if the last 4 didn't play, the Bynums drinking the alcohol would have been in the episode. Do you know what I mean? Before they went, the last 4 episodes were in Mega Frame, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are the last 4 that don't show. So these ones showed, but somewhere who did the one before yours, Zeke?
I don't remember. I remember
Was that
Adrian wrote it.
Was that Mike Ferraro?
That would have been the Return of the Crimson Binom.
Was he directing?
That was
I think that was Mike. Oh no, maybe that was Bosch.
No.
Mike Ferraro did the one.
No,
after
Bosch never directed.
Zeke's other episode.
Bosch and Michaela did Firewall. That was like what, episode 3 of the season?
In regards to the it being cancelled after that episode in the UK, or just not broadcasted, I believe season 3 was kind of in general had not been taken too well by parents in the UK. I believe the first episode, To Mend and Defend, with Dot's the zombie game and Dot's cleavage and Enzo's eye popping out and stuff like that. I think that was kind of the start, as I understand it, of a bad relationship with
the user looked like a devil.
Yes, and there's that too. Yeah, Zayton.
Yeah. And that was the kind of like, they got told that was going to be a problem.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And sometimes Ian was like, if you tell me I can't do it, that makes me want to do it more. But I remember.
Oh yeah, he would always do that.
Because it was scary. Like I remember at the time, I would probably watch it now and not think it's scary. But I remember at the time thinking to myself, that would be scary for a kid to he's a little kid in that.
Yeah, he is. He's
and that
tiny.
demon's coming out, and then he pokes his eye out. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a pretty a brutal shift if you were watching from the last season, and even if you think about it, season 2, it's really the last 6 episodes of season 2 start following an arc. You know what I mean? Like that's where that kind of arc starts to happen with Trust No One, and then going into the ending. Yeah. Whereas before that, they were very episodic, right? And it was like a bad thing could happen, but it would always end. Do you know what I mean? It would probably always end okay.
Yeah, everything.
But then
would
it
wrap
was
up.
like that. Yeah, and that was the perfect setup for that season 2 finale, where it didn't. Do you know what I mean? Because you were like, it's always going to end up okay. It always does, and it doesn't.
Until
You know what I mean?
it
And that's
doesn't.
why it had so much impact.
Yes.
But I think we might have stayed too dark on season 3. But I think they were trying to be at a different audience, I think, than what the actual audience maybe was.
Part of the audience was growing up too, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe we did swing too far one way, but yeah, I remember season 3. It was like it's gonna be dark. I just remember that, and in so many ways, right? And just the reboot of Dot and not Dot, sorry, Enzo and Andrea. Like wow, like what a change, right? And that was one episode, because you just all of a sudden you just show up and like they're now grown-ups.
Well, he basically dies at the end of the episode 4, right? Like as far
That's
as
right,
I mean, you're concerned, and
you
for
don't
Dot,
know.
Yeah, for Dot, he's dead. Do you know what I mean? For everyone else, he's gone. So it's like, as a viewer, at the end of episode 4, you're like, what the heck just happened?
They killed the little boy.
It's Sean Bean. You killed Edward Stark. What are you doing? You know what I mean?
And I think
ran out a window.
you're. Oh my! Does that mean that there's incest in ReBoot somewhere too, or?
Probably.
Well, you know what was funny about? I know that I remember Standards and Practices. Gavin has probably talked about this on a podcast somewhere, but Standards and Practices were ABC was adamant that hexadecimal and megabyte not be related for some reason, and then Ian got pissed off at one point. He's like, all right, they're brother and sister, and he just put it into the
in season 2. That's when they announced it too. That was kind of the where all that stuff that BS&P said you can't do that. Season 2 is where you guys said, guess what, we're doing it now.
Yeah, and then we went on ABC in season 3.
Funny how that works.
Which I think was kind of on purpose, by design. I think by Ian. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think he wanted to be on it.
No, they were kind of fed up.
Yeah, they were fed up with the notes they were giving, and kind of like, I don't know just the way the studio was being run. I think they just didn't agree with a lot of the ideologies and stuff.
Yeah,
Sure.
and whereas YTV in Canada we could do no wrong. They didn't.
Well,
they
they're like,
loved
thank
everything.
God, it's a cartoon. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we can.
It's animated. We can put it on our TV.
Yeah.
And I think you're right too, Casey. Like another example of ReBoot kind of being ahead of its time. You know how Harry Potter, with each book, it got a little bit more mature as the characters grew up. I think ReBoot did the same thing. You know, it started off, you know, when I guess I was like 6 or 7 or something like that. And, you know, as I grew up, the show also matured and kept me watching. You know,
kept you interested.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
That was the intention for sure. I mean, I think for sure from Ian, Phil, and Gav, that was their intention, was to, like, you know, these are the kids that have watched 2 seasons of this show are getting to an age now that they want to see more. Do you know what I mean? They want it aged up a bit. We'll still get the younger kids with the older episodes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they'll have somewhere to go.
So this means that when season 5 finally comes out, it'll be probably on HBO, right? which would be excellent. That'd be very cool.
That would be pretty rad.
Yeah. Another question from Fred here. I'm curious about this too. How exactly did Andrea get cured? Because Bob gives her his energy, and I think the implication is that he's also kind of giving her some of. Oh yeah, because he holds his icon up to hers. And
That's right. Yeah.
He repairs her icon. I think her icon is damaged, which is the other thing that happens to her. So they can't fix her icon, and her icon can't cure it. You know what I mean? Because normally her icon would help keep her alive and regenerate her.
Sure.
But because it's damaged, it doesn't kind of do that. And then Bob, with his Guardian Code icon, I think can use the Guardian Code to reset it or to reprogram it, basically to work.
So is it safe to assume that Matrix has a Guardian icon also, but it's only, I think it was the cadet. Bob said, you know, you're now a cadet. This is your cadet icon. So it's not like a full-fledged Guardians icon. Is that reasonable?
I think that's reasonable. I think I would agree with that. That's.
Well, Andrea's icon is, her icon's it's a sprite icon too, right? So
Yeah,
because she comes from the
right?
games, yeah. So they had to rig her icon so that she could come back out of the game.
That's true.
Yeah,
It is a
so
special
she wouldn't
case.
get taken away when she was.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
her
Yeah, so
icon's
there might-
a different level.
So there might be something in there, because I think I can't recall, but I think it might have been Mike Ferraro's episode where they do the reprogramming, like the one where you meet the surfer, isn't that?
Reprogrammed her icon in, I think it was in the Rocky Raccoon episode, wasn't it?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That
That's
was
how
the
she
scene
can go
I
into the
got.
game.
That was the big argument. That was the whole yell at Casey.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, I see. Right, because it's a triangle, isn't it? So it has
It's a
to kinda, like-
triangle.
yeah.
Yeah, so it was an important story part. So that's part of the reason why there was so much excitement over the fact that we had gotten it wrong. Maybe excitement's not the right word, but we had to get it right, and which we did. But yeah, so her icon is different to begin with.
And I guess Bob has more. I mean, he's been a Guardian a lot longer than. I mean, Enzo's not even a Guardian anymore. He's just a renegade. So he doesn't have the training.
He's probably gained something from his time in the web as well, in the sense of like some sort of, you know, I mean, some sort of ability or something.
I think there's a lot of interest in delving into what exactly happened to Bob.
Yeah, we always talked about it in terms of like what we all thought it might be. Do you know what I mean? Because we never really knew. I mean, and the other thing is we were making a lot of these earlier episodes before the other ones were written. So we weren't working to some sort of overall plan. I mean, they were, you know what I mean, but we didn't know it. Do you know what I mean? So when you were making earlier episodes, you weren't exactly sure how the ending was going to happen.
Sure. Yeah.
Or if someone was going to die in it, or you know what I mean?
I mean, because they were often.
Or if your ship was going to be surrounded by web.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I don't think all the episodes were written before we started production.
Oh God, no.
No, it was
no.
Yeah, everything was happening so fast. It was probably putting down the tracks of the train as it was.
Well, you were
down the track.
starting an episode on sometimes a second draft or something, right? And we recorded some episodes on the second draft just because if they didn't record it now, knowing that we were going to have pickups going down the line.
Yeah.
Because they were still finishing it off.
Yeah. They rewrote episode 3 while we were like 2 weeks in production.
Fireball.
No, not Firewall. Rocky. Was that episode 2?
Episode
Rocky.
2,
Rocky. That was episode 2.
Yeah. We were like 2 weeks in production, and we got a phone call, and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna rewrite the script, so we're gonna do a new voice record." And we're like,
Yikes.
"Oh, really?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh, so are we gonna get more time on our schedule? Like, are we gonna start over again?" And that's exactly what they said. They just laughed. No.
He said, "Sorry, I'm going into a tunnel. I'm losing you here."
Yeah, exactly. You guys eventually did, though, didn't you? Because Rocky was one of the shows that took. If I remember correctly.
No, well, I think we got an extra week. We managed to weasel another week, and but that was it. And that show, that's the show. I think that I think I cried. That was a hard show.
It came out. Can I say though, it came out really well though. That's one of the highlights of season 3, I think.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you know what? Going back and looking at it, I'm still proud of that show.
Yeah, the squash and stretch in that episode.
I learned a lot on that show. Yeah, that was with Jay Falconer. He was the director.
Yeah, and so he was the first director. Yeah, he was the first 2D director that we brought on.
Yeah, and I was so lucky to work with him because I learned so much from that guy.
Yeah, and he had never worked in 3D before, and
no,
it was just like we're gonna make this look like what I'm used to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, they brought him specifically to direct that because in that episode, Rocky the Raccoon is all that squash and stretch Warner Brothers kind of Wile E. Coyote stuff, and that was, I think it was pretty intentional because they wanted to use that as a proof of concept to show that we could do more traditional style animation. That led us to Weirdos.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, so Jay and I worked together on Weirdos. I was the story editor and producer on that.
Interesting.
And got to direct one episode, and so we took a lot of the stuff that we had learned on Between the Raccoon and a Hard Place and applied it to Weirdos.
And I've watched that show recently too, like within the past month or so. It looks really good. The animation is really good. That squash and stretch. I'm impressed.
Yeah, they were like it was the same crews basically, all much better after the reboot kind of battles. The battles.
Arcade asks if there is any part of the web or its design that the creator, that you guys would like to share that wasn't in the show, little hidden secrets or anything like that.
In design.
Yeah.
No, as we say, the web was one picture, design-wise.
Any like staff photos that kind of made it in as textures anywhere, anything like that?
I don't know. I think that would have been too difficult at the time. Yeah.
Sure.
We didn't put Easter eggs. No, I don't think we did that stuff.
Was the penguin, right? That we then eventually got in trouble for.
The penguin.
Yeah. And then the homages to like different films, right? Where we would just kind of hint at stuff. Yeah. In NProg, we did an ode to Blade Runner.
And I think there's also like the signs inside mainframe that go around with the zeros and ones.
Oh, they all say something too. Yeah.
They say something too.
Something vulgar, as I understand it.
Probably.
It might be. I don't remember. We used to just kind of like give a suggestion on what we thought it could say. I remember suggesting that when it was saying something like when it reset and everything came back in that episode. I remember like suggesting it saying something really stupid but happy. Do you know what I mean? Like the computer's like cheering. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. Like yay, yay, yay. You know, like the same kind of numbers over. But I don't think we did that. But I remember like suggesting that at one moment, but probably got turned down.
We had a lot of references to Vancouver as well, like in terms of the mainframe areas.
Kit sector.
Yeah.
Bodway.
Bodway. There was a Kitsilano area that was similar. But and also the two small binomes with big CPUs was a reference to a moving company in Vancouver, which is, what was it, two small men with big hearts moving.
Big hearts.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which I really liked, being from Vancouver. You know, as a kid, I don't know why it never occurred to me to just go up the street and knock on your door and see, you know, can I have a tour, please? Because I was so into the show at that time.
Funny, I had the same experience. I remember watching ReBoot on TV and then all of a sudden seeing like the end credits, and then I had to go by and go, made in Vancouver, Canada. I'm like, what? It's made in Vancouver, Canada? I live in Vancouver, Canada. And I was like, why aren't I like going to? I mean, I was doing mostly live action stuff. I don't know anything about computers and animation, but somehow lucked into a job there.
Is that what got you to go and just drop a resume? Like, is that how you actually got in, Andrew?
I think it was Ange Stevenson was like, when Beast Wars was starting up and they were looking for editors. And she knew I already knew how to, I was editing on the Avid already. So she introduced me. I came in, did an interview, but it was like I think it was Steve Sachs and Craig McEwen were hired instead of me. I don't know why I always remember those things. I just don't know.
Still hold the grudge.
Still hurts. You know what I mean? Still hurts.
By the way, I know now, Zeke, you started way at the beginning, and Andrew, you started doing the editing and stuff. Casey, how is it that you came onto Mainframe?
So I guess during their season 2 stint, they came out to Sheridan College to find some people, and I was going to school at that time, so I was just graduating, and it was Andrew Grant, and so Spanky, and CME, Christopher Michael Easton. They were 2 animators at the time, and they came out, so I guess they sent them out to Sheridan to meet our class and look at the grad reels, and they recruited me. So me and 2 other classmates, Jonathan Moyes and Raktaf Rody, got recruited right out of school. It was great. Finished Sheridan, we had jobs, they flew us out to Vancouver. I thought it was amazing. So like that was how I got there, and it was like, I remember the first week, you guys, I think, were wrapping on season 1 or something, and there was a big rap party. We just partied like crazy. I remember we drank our limit at the Yale. Do you remember this, Zeke?
Yeah.
And then Mark Ralston came in, and he's just like, and the bartender's like, yeah, you guys, your tab is full, and he just slapped like, I don't know,
his credit card down.
I just said, keep the party going. And I was like, that was day 3 for me. I was like, this is awesome. I love this place.
That was Mainframe's slogan, though, wasn't it? Work hard, play hard.
Yeah. So yeah, I got recruited out of school, so I was super lucky.
Value Caps Lock here is asking about Ray's icon. It's usually the Motorola logo, but there have been some exceptions. The previously designed icon sometimes finds its way into shots and stuff like that. Is there any rhyme or reason to this?
I think it was part of a promotion, I think.
Yeah, it was supposed to, I remember that it was a Motorola.
Yeah.
We got a bit of money from Motorola.
To have a character in ReBoot, yeah.
But do you remember, I think, since he first showed up in the previous episode in the Return of the Crimson Binome, and so I think by the time that Andrew and I got him, so the model had been built with whatever icon it was, I can't even remember, but then partway through they made the deal with Motorola and slapped that on, and so probably on Crimson Binome there had been shots animated with the old logo that maybe didn't make it through QC. Did we have QC?
I think they had some sort of QC, but again, I think it was not the same QC we have now, where somebody's watching it, he knows what they're looking for. I think it was someone else going, yeah, it seems fine. Yeah.
Some runner.
Yeah.
It apparently made it into End Prog as well. There's some scene when he's walking with mouse and he's got the old icon on.
Oh, does he? Oh, I can see that
apparently
happening.
I suppose you must have had like the model, like 2 models of him, I suppose, one with the Motorola logo and one without.
More than we have had it.
Our models are like
maybe,
our archive system, or like our
canning system.
Our database of assets
the can,
was
right?
probably pretty
Yeah.
the can, exactly, was not super organized. Like you could easily pull the wrong model out.
Oh yeah, so if the animator took the wrong model and no one saw it, yeah, you wouldn't have known. And animators would do things, they would take something out of the can, and then, because back then, like, we didn't set up, like, name selections, and, I don't know, we just didn't streamline things, and every animator would go in and, like, customize name selections for themselves, so when they were animating the characters, they had it set up a certain way. So someone could have taken him, set it up, and then we could have changed the logo, and then when it was their turn to animate him in a shot, they might have used their version, because, oh, well, I already got this guy all rigged, right?
Yeah. So. Yeah, from a technical standpoint, I remember the time where it was like mind-blowing that the modeling department could make a change on a model, and then everybody
update everything.
Would update everything.
That was
Yeah, you're like, whoa, because before the model would change, and then you'd have to remind you, dude, you're like 3 versions old. You go back and get the right version.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Because they would just save it locally on their machine, or in their, well, not on their machine, but in their folder.
In their folder, yeah.
And then it would be that until they changed it. And and they wouldn't, and often the animators wouldn't want to change it, because if they'd already animated the character and they got a new character model, then some of their animation might not work, and they'd be like, I'm not even going to bother updating this model. Maybe no one will notice.
To see how far it'll
Sometimes you didn't even know. Sometimes you didn't even know, right?
Yeah.
Things were happening so fast.
Sure. With a small change like that, just the icon that's, on his belt, that's hard to spot.
It's hilarious. I just went onto YouTube and I'm looking at it now. It's the wave.
The wave, that's what it was. Yeah. Surfer dude. Speaking of season 3 and all the I mean, season 1, season 2, you were in the same location essentially the whole way through, but suddenly in season 3, you have all these new settings and all these new things that you have to model. What was it like to create all these things? And I mean, it must have taken a lot of time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think we definitely had a bigger modeling department in season 3, if I remember correctly, right? So before then, I think the modeling department, when I joined, the modeling department was officially, it was 2 guys, Gerald Lizay and Andy Sokolowski. Was that his name? I think so. And then it was me. I was like the 3rd guy they hired, and as a modeler. So I officially started as a modeler, not an animator. But even back then in season,
I started as a modeler too.
Yeah, but even like when you started animating, we all still did other stuff, right? Like we still modeled things. If you need, oh, you know what, we need this prop for this one shot. Oh, okay, I'll make it, right? So back then, as an animator at Mainframe, you were animating, you were lighting, you were rendering, you were dumping shots to the machine room. Nowadays, it's also like it's so specific, right? I just animate. That's all I do. So I think back then, yeah, everyone was doing a bit of it, but I think season 3 we officially built a larger modeling department.
Well, modeling was almost like the entry-level position in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Kind of.
It's like, you know how to use the software, go in, start doing some modeling. We'll see what you can do. You start to animate. Obviously, there were some people that were like way better at modeling.
I mean, I imagine at this point too, Mainframe was kind of at its peak in terms of numbers of people working there, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were growing. We were growing at that point, for sure. Do you think we were 500 at that point?
There was easily like eight suites going on though. Remember, because there was the 4 on ReBoot and then the 4 on
Shadow Raiders, or was it the Beast Wars? Because we had 2
Shadow
floors.
Raiders was going too.
We had Shadow Raiders started, and then we had Beast Wars or Beast Machines, whatever. There was at least 2 floors of production.
Beast Wars.
Beast Machines wasn't in the old building though, was it?
No, Beast Machines was the new building.
And ReBoot was season 3 was the old building, yeah.
No, season 3 was it?
No. Season 4 was the new building.
Oh, that's right. Season 3 was the old building upstairs. That's right.
We moved in 99, like from 98 to 99. We moved to Kits from downtown.
Yeah, because season 3 was they added the floor, right? They added. Yeah. They got another floor for season 3 in the old building.
So it was consistently around 350, I think.
I think it was probably around 300 at that time. Yeah, 300, 350.
Yeah. Well, I got one more question for you guys. Cotton asks, what do you think about the fan base? And how do you feel knowing that there are still fans of the original series? Do you ever engage with the fandom or explore the fan works?
Only recently, for me.
Yeah, I don't so much engage in the fan works, but I do, you know what, because I teach and I constantly get new students, I'm always surprised that there are still, you know, a handful of people in the crowd when I meet a new class that remember the show. And I always think that, oh man, like that's so long ago, nobody's watching those, and you know, you're getting new students every year, and they're always around the same age. So you figure at some point this is, you know, not going to be on people's radar. But my student body is so international. There's always at least like, you know, 2 or 3, sometimes 4 people like, oh yeah, I remember that show. That show was awesome. Like, I'm really shocked. I'm super surprised. So it feels pretty good that the show has this lasting power.
Yeah, same for me. I'm always really kind of like surprised at how people have still maintained that interest in it. And I think it has to do to how the stories work and the initial concept about having, you know, this little world inside of a computer. I think that was kind of like grasped so many people's imagination at that point that it just kind of like, it sticks with you, right? It's one of those things. I think it'll be the way, you know, nowhere close the way Harry Potter is, but you know, the Harry Potter will always be around. And I think at some level, ReBoot will always be around because computers will always be around. And ReBoot is part of that history, I think, in a way. And I love, anytime I hear anybody say anything about like, oh, I love that as a kid. It used to make me feel old. Now it just makes me feel happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're used to feeling old now.
Yeah, no, I'm used to it.
Yeah, that's the way I feel too. It's like, I've gotten over feeling old.
Yeah. Just slip into it like a hot bathtub.
Yep. When I was working at Rainmaker last in 2016, one of my editors was a young guy, probably in his mid-20s, and he had a ReBoot tattoo. And I was like, whoa.
No way.
Yeah. Which tattoo? What was the tattoo
of the ReBoot icon.
The icon?
Nice.
Right on.
Yeah.
Just on his chest, on his left pec or something?
On his shoulder.
Nice.
Wow.
It's hard to
That's
reboot
cool.
when it's back there, but
I know it should have been on his below his belly button.
something like that.
On his left, over his heart, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Wasn't it
yeah,
his
his
heart?
chest.
Yeah. That's very cool. Yeah. Well, the community, the online community of ReBoot now, it's really great. There's a lot of great people there, a lot of talented people who are trying to bring life back into the show. There are people who've done art and music and 3D modeling and stuff, and even folks who have done
the cosplay is so great.
Cosplays, that's right. I just talked with Michael Donovan 2 weeks ago about Wizards, Warriors, and a word from our sponsor, and I showed him some of the cosplay stuff by Raquel Lynn.
Raquel Lynn is amazing. I can't believe how dedicated she is and how good she looks in her cosplay. And I saw that picture of the Wizards, Warriors, and word from our sponsor where they had Mike the TV and
Yes,
Bob.
I saw that. Yes.
So that is.
Yes.
The funny thing is, like, that the ReBoot is the show that I've worked on that would have had, if the internet had been around, would have had the biggest fan base. But since the internet wasn't around, it didn't feel like anybody was watching when we were making it.
Yeah.
I don't remember thinking like, oh yeah, we're making this for so many people. I was just like, we're just kind of making it for ourselves. And anybody I ever talked to, like friends and family, were like, didn't know what I was talking about, or they were
nobody knew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't
What do you
understand.
do? I work on a
or-
show. What's it called? ReBoot. I
Never heard of it.
You're like,
Yep.
yeah, sure, okay, whatever.
I remember.
Then don't ask me next time.
I mean, I guess maybe it was just the fan base, the age of the fan base at the time, because I would go to Metrotown over in Burnaby there. They had that big Toys R Us down on the bottom floor on the Metrotown side.
Yep.
And I'd be like walking down the corridor to get there on my way to buy some ReBoot action figures or those Fleer Ultra trading cards. And, oh, hey, there's my friend coming out of the Toys R Us. And, oh, hey, man, what are you doing? Oh, you're getting some ReBoot toys today, too. Oh, that's cool. Well, all right, well, I'll see you later. Anyway.
Wow.
Keep on walking
Jeez.
a little bit. Oh, hey, I know that guy too. Hey, what are you doing here today? Oh, I just picked up this, this new hack toy. Look at it. Oh man, that's cool. I'm gonna rearrange all the parts and just seriously. This one time I went, it was like 3 people who I knew from school in a row coming out of the Toys R Us, and I was on the way into the Toys R Us to do the exact same thing. So
That's awesome.
Yeah,
See,
yeah.
we would never have ever.
Yeah, we
thought
never knew
was
that.
happening.
No.
That there was
Yeah.
a run on ReBoot toys. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely, like everyone my age, and I'm 34 this year. Everyone my age, and people not just my age, but people a little bit older and younger than me too. They're all in the same boat, especially in Canada. I think, that it seems to me anyway, that's really where the core fan base is.
I
and-
think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
because there was something about it being a Canadian show, right? A Canadian production, and I think that was
Yes.
the thing that like I said, caught my eye being in Vancouver, but also that Canadian flag it had on it, made in Canada.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And it was one of those things where you're like, huh, Canada can do that?
Canada can do.
Can do that. Yeah. So it was
Yeah.
kind of like it's one of the things that attracted me to the company originally was that, they do this show. I remember going in it the first time I seen they had mats and things and spaceships and flying around. I was like, this is where I want to be.
Canada, we did pioneer a lot of that stuff. I mean, the software we used was based out of Montreal, Softimage, right?
Yeah.
Maya was before it was bought by Autodesk, was Alias Wavefront based out of Toronto, right? So a lot of the
That's
stuff
right, yeah.
that we're doing, it was Canada, man.
Yeah.
We were rocking, and all those animators down at ILM who were rocking it, they were coming from Canada.
Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
they were. Yeah.
They were, right? Steve Spaz
Yeah.
Williams, Canadian from Sheridan College, right? Eric Armstrong, he's Canadian too. So it's been a lot
The
of
guys
Canadian.
that did Jurassic Park.
Chris Bruff on the DVD commentary said that at that time, so this is back in the early 90s now, like one in 3 animators were from Canada. Is that, do
Yeah.
you know anything about that? Does that sound like a realistic
That
number?
sounds about right. I
Yeah.
think-
I-
and you went to Sheridan, Casey. Like there was a
Yeah.
lot of they had big a lot of influence in the industry, right?
Yeah, I mean, in the early days, and I went through the 3D program at Sheridan, and when I went, they started that program, I think, in the 80s. So, initially when CGI was, gaining momentum, Sheridan was one of the only schools really teaching it. And then in terms of the 2D side of Sheridan, that was used for a long time. It was kind of like a Disney recruiting ground. So I think Canada's always been at the forefront of animation in a lot of different ways, unbeknownst to a lot of people. And then you look at the work that the NFB did as well, right?
Yes,
I mean, it's
yes.
world renowned. So I think we've had a long tradition of animation in Canada, even though we don't really know it.
We're humble about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
We're super humble. Yeah.
But we're like humble patriots. Do you know what I mean? Like we're proud to be Canadian and everything like that. But we don't need to push it in your face.
No.
Humble patriots. I like that. All right, guys. Well, I think that's all I have by way of questions. I just want to say before we wrap
This
up
has been
here,
really great.
thank you
It's
very
been
much.
fun.
Yeah. Thank
You're
you
very
guys
welcome.
for joining. Yeah, it's really cool. And anytime you guys want to do this again, you were talking about NProg before and having some of the other animators come in.
Yeah, and also
Absolutely.
I was just going to say to you, if there's any of the people you were talking about, like in the fan base, forward any of that stuff to me. I'd certainly like to
Sure. Yeah.
see a lot of that stuff. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. And you guys want to say anything in closing?
I'm gonna just say, I'm just gonna shout a big thanks to everyone and for all the fans who've supported the show and continue to support the show. It's I'm gonna kind of repeat some of the things that Zeke said. I think at the time when we were making this, we didn't really realize what this, how big it would become, and it was just this thing we're working on. And as the years go by, I've really begun to value all of the experiences on that production, all the things that I learned, and it's amazing to see how much it's impacted people.
Awesome.
You're right. It is.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. It's an honor.
How about you, Andrew?
I'd have to say the same thing. I think it's just one of those things to have it's probably the one production I've worked on that's had the longevity that it has in the sense of continuing having a fan base. I mean, I don't know about any of the other seasons that I've done have been popular for a short period of time and then have disappeared or whatever, whereas ReBoot was the one that seemed to always still have fans, and people come up to you, or when you say it to people, they're like, oh, my kids love that, and you're like, really? That's awesome. So I think, yeah, like Casey said, it's an honor to have done something that people actually really, really enjoy.
Maybe I mentioned this last time, and maybe it's a little bit strange, but my daughter now, she's two and a half or so. She's learning 2 languages right now, right? She's learning the English and Japanese, so she's a little bit delayed in her speaking, but she has a few words, and one of those words is ReBoot. I'm not joking. She said, "Papa,
amazing.
I've got these the figures up on my desk here, and I sometimes I show her an episode or two, and she'll slap me on the arm like, Papa, weeboo.
You'll have to get a video of that and post that.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's so cute.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Actually, I will do that. Yeah. Zeke, how about you?
Well, for me, the great thing about ReBoot was my memories and the experiences of the time. Like, it was so fun and ridiculous, and I just have all the late nights and all the were fun late nights. Like, I just remember laughing so hard at 2 a.m. that we couldn't get up off the floor, and Andrew, who we called Monkey, would come in and do something ridiculous, and we'd be so punch drunk because it was late, and it wasn't a grind the way that you would think a production that insane would have been.
Yeah, you're right.
It was just so much fun, and we were surrounded by friends, and we were all so naive and young. Like the hub were in their 30s. Like, I think Ian was maybe 40, and we were all in our 20s. And
Yeah.
I was 30 when I started.
Oh well,
I
you
was
were,
the-
yeah,
I
you
was
were one
the
of the
old
older
man.
guys.
Yeah.
You just acted like a teenager.
It was my first full-time job.
and so, but nobody really had anything else to do. Like, in terms of we were at that point in our lives. We didn't have kids yet, and
Yeah.
we didn't have any other obligations, and this was our passion, and we were on the forefront. Everything was kind of new, and we were making it up, and everyone was such a camaraderie, and the few moments that we had away from work, we'd spend together, right?
Yeah, totally.
We'd
yeah.
work for 12
Yeah.
hours and then go drinking across the street, or we'd spend New Year's together, even though we just had spent the previous day together. And so for me, it was just like a golden time in my career.
Yeah, I can agree to that for sure.
Yeah, it didn't seem like work the way that work is. That work is for most people, and
The way it
now.
seems like now.
Yeah. And the way that most people describe work.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think
We
you're
wanted
I
to
think
do
it
it.
was because we were young.
wanted to
Yeah,
be
we
there.
were young,
Yeah.
and we wanted to be there, and we were like,
Yep.
encouraged to like put a lot of ourselves into it.
And unlike most like any industry, any normal industry, and animation now and filmmaking and pretty much any industry, there was nobody that was above us that had done it before. There was nobody teaching us. There was no one saying, this is how it's done, this is what you should do, we were all just making it up as we went along.
Yeah, talk about the Wild West.
And I'm going to say one more thing. And you know what? I think we were taken care of. I think the studio really valued us, and they showed it in terms of the way they fed us, the way they paid us bonus, right? The way, and I think we were treated kindly. And I attribute that to the hub, right? They made it a great place to work. So Ian and Gav and Phil, right? They made it a great place.
They were good bosses. They were creative, and they were crazy. They were crazy Brits, but they were really fun to hang out with.
They were crazy. Yeah.
And even today, they're really active in the fan community. Gavin, especially, he's always on the Facebook answering questions. So it's very cool to be able to interact with him and with you guys here. And I guess in closing, I just want to say that I'm looking forward to the cameo of Binomes in the next Wallace and Gromit film. They owe you guys. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cambo.
No problem.
Anna, what's this?
ReBoot.
Anna, what's this?
ReBoot.
Anna, what's this?
Ginja.
Yin-chan.